Welcome to Badass Women at Any Age, the show that introduces you to amazing women who are challenging the status quo and changing the rules of the game. This is your host, Bonnie Marcus. I love Katie Couric's definition of a badass woman. She says that someone who stands up for herself, is confident, and not afraid to challenge the hierarchy, the patriarchy, or conventional thinking. And my guest today, Lori Mihalich-Levin, certainly qualifies as a badass by that definition. Lori is an empowered working mother who successfully juggles her roles as a female partner at a law firm, wife, and mother of two boys. She's a Princeton graduate, founder of Mindful Return, a program that helps new parents return to work after parental leave, and author of the book entitled Back to Work After Baby: How to Plan and Navigate a Mindful Return After Maternity Leave. She's a partner in the healthcare practice at a global law firm, Dentons US LLP. Over the years, Lori has helped working parents who struggle with work-life balance, navigating the back-to-work transition after parental leave, mindfulness as busy professionals, and time management. With her Mindful Return community, she has been successful in helping new parents feel calm, supported, confident, and connected. She's also challenged the status quo, helped employers retain their new parent talents, maintain diversity and respect differences, and foster lifelong connections to other working parents. Since its founding in 2014, more than 1,000 new parents who work for 64 employers have enrolled and taken her e-course. Lori has been called Working Mama Guru by Working Mother magazine, and you can find her published works and interview at Fox 5, Washington Post, and Time magazine. Lori also has a podcast that supports new parents called Parents at Work, which can be found on Apple and all other places you listen to podcasts. Lori, welcome to Badass Women.
It's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me, Bonnie.
Well, wow. I mean, I love the work that you're doing. And, I'm thinking back to when I was a new parent. Boy, I sure could have used that kind of support. But how did you get to where you are today? What is your own personal badass story about things that you've overcome in your personal journey?
Yeah. So thank you for the kind words. And, really in creating Mindful Return, I created what I wish had existed even 9 years ago, because my boys are now 7 and 9. And I think sort of to illustrate the arc of where I hope we're headed, I'll start by saying that when I was born in the late 70s, my mother quit her job / was forced out of her job after becoming pregnant, which of course wasn't illegal at the time. And I remember,
when did it become illegal, Lori?
Yeah, I'm a lawyer, but I'm a Medicare reimbursement lawyer. I don't know exactly what year. Sorry, can't pinpoint that for you. But I remember growing up as a child, hearing her narrative that the only 2 jobs she was permitted to, aspire to were a teacher or a nurse. That was sort of the path that she was directed to. And if you fast forward to the conversation, to a conversation that I had with my then 5-year-old as we're walking to school one day, and he looks up at me and he goes, "Mommy, are boys allowed to be lawyers when they grow up?" I thought I was just going to die laughing. I'm like, on the one hand, I couldn't believe, I just was so touched by that concept that he thinks all lawyers in the world in the world are women, rather, because he knows me, and he knew at the time, like all, my lawyer mom friends. And on the other hand, I was sad because I wanted to reinforce that any child can grow up and have any aspiration, right? And so I love to see that sort of these gender norms are really changing. I grew up in a household where there were very severe gender dynamics and domestic violence, and just, not the most egalitarian or comfortable place for a kid, which I think is probably the story of a lot of people who want to go on and make change in terms of gender equality in the world.
Well, and some people escape it and some stay stuck. So how
Yeah.
did you break out?
I think I put my nose to the grindstone. I really immersed myself in the violin at the time. I locked myself in my room and practiced for hours and hours on end, and wound up really becoming a good musician, and made it to like the national level for orchestra, and probably almost went to music school until I realized that I probably didn't want to spend 5 hours alone per day in a practice room, and I really enjoyed being with people. But I think my violin was sort of my ticket out.
Was
And
that really your identity then?
that was my identity. I was the studious good girl. I was, second in a class of 550 students. I put my nose down, became a perfectionist, and did my work, right? And that, I think, was perhaps one of it's not a healthy coping mechanism, but there are many more unhealthy coping mechanisms that I could have turned to, I suppose.
Right.
And so I'm sort of grateful to, the fact that I had the skills and ability to really focus on school and academics, and my entire identity was academics and my music. And I think that's what allowed me to get into a really good university, and branch off and start thinking about life outside of, I grew up in central Pennsylvania, and really thinking about life outside of that area. And, I went on to college. I wound up spending a year in France after college. And that for me was probably one of the biggest turning points of sort of like leaving everyone and everything that I knew behind, and starting to think about how I wanted to live my own life in my own way. I grew up in a very Catholic family, and one of the reasons that my parents didn't get divorced was because of the belief that in the Catholic Church that wasn't acceptable. It was a very sort of conservative approach to Catholicism. And when I went off to France, I sort of started finding my own way and realizing that I didn't want to be so affiliated with the Catholic Church. I wound up meeting my husband while I lived in France, but he was from New Jersey and I was from Pennsylvania, and we met in the Loire Valley on September 11th, 2001, which is sort of a strange time for two people to meet. We became friends for a couple of years, and then we wound up getting married, and that was another really personal turning point for me because he is Jewish. When I started dating him, my mother completely disagreed. And it was a big decision for me to say, like, he's the person I'm committing to. I wound up converting to Judaism myself. And I moved forward in creating the life that I wanted to create with him, even though I didn't have the approval of my family.
Did you ever make peace with your family about that?
On that particular issue, no. Which is,
But you stood up for yourself.
And I love my husband and have a wonderful family, and it's a healthy, happy, wonderful relationship. I stood up for myself. I have adopted parents in life who are completely and utterly supportive of myself and my children. And we, I think, create the lives and the families for ourselves that we need. So that's the very personal side. And then I had 2 kids, and gosh, if I didn't really go off the rails after my second child, and I'm sure that I had undiagnosed postpartum anxiety and potentially depression, and was crying on the kitchen floor more often than I would like to admit. It was so overwhelming to be the mom of a baby and a 2-year-old and have a full-time job and be putting a lot of pressure on myself. And so I was looking for resources at that point, not finding what I wished had existed. And that's sort of what launched my foray into entrepreneurialism, which totally took me by surprise because I was what I considered to be a risk-averse lawyer, not a business founder. But so lots of identity shifts in there. Yes.
Not necessarily a common profession for women to enter and be successful at.
The lawyer or the entrepreneur?
Well, let's start with the lawyer.
Yeah, well, I mean, fortunately, it's becoming more and more possible, right? I was reading the wonderful recent article about the 9 women who were in Ruth Bader Ginsburg's class.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
At Harvard Law.
Talk about pioneers. Wow.
Whew, I know. And what they had to endure and experience in law school bore absolutely no semblance to my law school experience, quite fortunately. I went to Georgetown for law school, and it was 50-50, if not 50-some% women, right? Perhaps
But
even
not
more
that
than
many
men.
women then enter the profession equal
So,
to men, or
so they enter at the same rates, but then
then
as
they
you go
drop out.
along, right, so only approximately 20 to 21% of partners at law firms are women. And the statistics on women of color are abysmal, and underrepresented minorities in the legal profession. It's still quite the white male profession from a power perspective.
Well,
And
I mean,
now's
I
the time to change
remember.
that.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I just said now's the time to change that.
I remember speaking with a female partner at an LA law firm, LA based, actually, it's a national law firm as well. And we were talking about, losing women, not having women stay on the partnership track, et cetera. And she said she finds that they lose female lawyers, not after the first child necessarily, but the second. So to your point and your own life journey there, it's like,
my husband and I had a saying that 1 + 1 = 85.
yeah.
Like, we were just decimated. And, initially we're like, oh, we're going to have 3 kids. And then I was in the OB's office with him, pregnant with my second, like very largely pregnant with my second. And we looked at each other and I was like, I think I'm done. And he looked at me and he goes, oh, good, because I'm done too. We're like, all right, that settles it. We're stopping at 2. It was 2, the transition to 2.
Yeah.
We also referred to it as the first year of having 2 children, we referred to as the BHP iron ore train, which is the longest train in the entire world. It felt like that year was never, ever going to end. Maybe kind of like 2020 and COVID.
Gosh, I mean, my children are now grown, but they were also 2 years apart. My profession at the time was teaching. It wasn't as taxing or stressful as perhaps being in a competitive environment.
I don't know.
Like
Teaching
law.
strikes me as incredibly taxing, especially since we're all looking down the barrel of having to do it ourselves this fall. So
Yes,
my
again.
hat goes off to you.
Again.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, just going back to your personal story a bit. Do you find that looking back, you always had the confidence to challenge the status quo, or was that a turning point with your marriage?
It was not ingrained in me, I don't think, early on. In fact, the lesson that I was taught was please everybody, right? The people pleasing thing is still something that I have to
Yeah.
combat. And, I think a lot of folks in environments like law firms come from backgrounds where they're determined to please everyone who presents a request to them. And that's what makes them very successful in a lot of these jobs.
Well, it also sabotages their career advancement.
Well, there's that. I mean,
Yes.
and your personal ability to draw boundaries and all sorts of things that are healthy skills for life are not really compatible with that. But I am not quite sure. I always had a sense of outrage about the injustices that were happening in my own house. And I started taking on, it was really in college that I took a summer internship with the National Network to End Domestic Violence. And I had this sort of aha moment that, like, oh my gosh, this work that I'm doing, oh, that's what was happening in my house. And I got really angry about that. And I think I sort of funneled the anger toward trying to make change.
Yeah. And it's certainly you're in a profession where you can make things happen. Yeah, for women.
Yeah.
Let's talk about, what you see now with professional parents who are perhaps one's working, both are working, and are now returning to the workplace. Of course, now we're doing it remotely, but we're still doing it. We're still working. What do you find new parents need most in terms of support? What are their greater challenges? I mean, some of them obviously may seem obvious, like nobody has the time for anything. But what do you find are their greatest challenges?
Yeah, so I guess there are a couple of questions packed in there, right? One
Yep.
is what are the things that support them most, and then what are the things that they're most challenged with? I think those might be two different things. But in terms of the supports that folks are looking for, I think and I'll pause and say that I wish this weren't the case, because winning the manager lottery as a new parent is not what you should have to do. But having said that, I think one of the best things that can happen to a new working parent is to have a manager who has empathy and who says, hey, I'm going to help you through this time in your life, and we're going to figure this out together. We're going to come up with flexible
Yeah,
options
how
and
often does that
solutions.
happen, Lori?
It happens a lot in certain workplaces and not very
Mhm.
much in others. I want to give credit to the fantastic managers out there. I had two myself who were very supportive and willing to figure out a way to make work and life work for me. But that is not the universal experience, and I recognize that.
Mhm.
I think another thing, companies can do, I mean, there are a million things that employers can do to support their working parents. One is to connect them to each other, right? To really help them foster and support working parent groups. So about a year and a half ago, I started an email list of the leaders of working parent and caregiver groups at companies and organizations all over the country, just so that we all don't have to recreate the wheel as we start
Mm.
these groups. And the companies and employers can compensate the leaders of these groups for the work that they're doing to build community. I think a lot of time the ERG, the employee resource group types, do a lot of this pro bono
Yeah,
volunteer
it's all
work.
volunteer,
Yeah.
right?
And there is a movement to start to recognize the value that that brings, and to support folks, by some FTE time of their job being allocated to that, or through bonuses, or there are other ways to compensate.
Mhm.
Speaking of compensation, paid parental leave is a huge one. And the flexibility to ramp up and ramp down at the end of a pregnancy or the beginning of a return to work after leave can be really huge. I mean, remote work used to be one of those things that went on a list of ways that you could support parents, but right now everybody's doing it.
And it's
Um,
not supportive of parents.
yeah, exactly. It's a bit of a nightmare. And I'll just, on the support side, the last thing I'll say is to remind working parents that the skills that they are gaining through parenthood are actually the things that are going to make them amazing leaders. Like, we don't hear that narrative enough. We hear, oh, well, once you become a working parent, you're just not as devoted to your job and you have to leave early and blah, blah, blah. And I say, like, that's crap. What I say is that when you become a parent, you gain all these skills. You gain skills around prioritization, problem solving, empathy, being
Mhm.
able to meet the needs of customers who can't articulate their needs very well to you. And all of those things make for really amazing leaders. So look at how badass the working parent leaders are in the workplace.
You
And
know
like,
who brought that to my attention? I
who's that?
read a quote by Nancy Pelosi
There you go.
saying that,
Speaking
as a
of,
parent, you have to be a diplomat.
yes,
You have to
yes,
be a mediator.
yep,
You,
negotiation,
you
all
need to
those
manage
things.
your time. And so,
Yeah,
her background of being a mother and certainly a grandmother, she said, helped her qualify for leadership roles.
absolutely. Look at Tammy Duckworth. Look at these
Yep.
amazing women leaders. Yeah. So I think that's just a story that we need to keep repeating and telling the new parents and saying, hey, I believe in you, and I know you're going to be you're going to continue to be an amazing leader. You haven't lost any skills just because you've become a parent. Really
But our
reminding parents of
society
that.
doesn't give working mothers or mothers mothering, let's just say that, and keep the dads out of it for a while, but much
Hmm.
credit, much respect.
Yes, and the data proves that there is a motherhood penalty at work,
Yes.
right? That we get called in for interviews less often. And, I have a friend who was offered a position with an organization, and after she received the offer, she asked the simple question about what the family leave policy was at the organization, and the organization rescinded her offer right after she asked that question. Now, is that legal? No, but does it happen to people? Yes.
Yeah. I
So,
interviewed a woman for my book, The Politics of Promotion,
uh-huh.
and she was definitely a high achiever on the leadership track. She was working for one of the 5 big consulting firms.
Mm-hmm.
And she took a very short maternity leave so that she could come back and jump right in. But when she came back, she said all of a sudden she realized, she wasn't getting the same type of clients. She wasn't asked um, to engage in the same types of projects. So she took it upon herself to go to HR and say, hey, I noticed that things are different.
Mm-hmm.
And her HR rep said, well, we assumed, right, that you didn't want
Mm-hmm.
to work as hard, or you didn't travel, when she had put everything in place to be able to take care of that. So
Yes.
there's
Yes.
definitely a motherhood penalty. Definitely.
There is. And you raise such a great point about the assumptions. I'm
Mm-hmm.
currently in the process of creating a version of the mindful return program that's specifically for managers. And so I'm deep in the thick of that. And the number one message is make no assumptions. You don't know whether the person wants to travel or not. You don't know
Yep.
whether they're the primary breadwinner, or whether, even if they're not the primary breadwinner, whether they want to do that next big project or not. You have no idea. So yeah, let's not be paternalistic in terms of the types of work that we're giving new parents when they come back from
Yeah.
leave. Yeah.
Assumptions, they're really, really strong. And we internalize a lot of them. So
Yes.
that works against us too. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess before I hop over to the concerns and fears that the new moms have, I just want to put in a plug also for the fact that research shows that when dads take their leave, their full leave, or as much leave as they can, women, their partner, significant other, wife, spouse, their careers, the mother's careers actually do better. The fathers are more bonded with the kids, and it de-genders and de-stigmatizes the leave taking process for parents in general. So one of the best things that I think companies can do is to support men in taking their parental leave just as much as women, and to ask the same questions of dads around caregiving and what they're planning to do as the moms. So
But research also shows, Lori, that there's a hesitancy on a man's part to do that.
yes, I know. And there is research that shows that men can be penalized for taking their leave. And oh, what a mess. Yeah. And there's a fatherhood bonus at the same time. The dads get extra promotions and whatever when they become family man who needs to support the family. So it's just, yeah, it's complicated, right? So the things that moms are most concerned about, and I was just on a call with a group of them this morning, especially working from home, is, and even when you're not working from home, what am I missing, right? What milestones am I missing? Am I really deleteriously affecting the relationship that I'm going to have? Is the attachment going to be weaker? How can I possibly turn off work when I'm at home? How can I turn off home when I'm at work? How am I going to make
Such a
these things
challenge.
fit? And then, really, really big questions around division of household labor. And, when you transition back to work after leave, chances are you need to make some adjustments to what it was that you were doing around the house while you were on leave versus what's going to happen when you need to sit down and do your work. Even if that's, in a closet in your bedroom while we're in COVID. But really having those difficult conversations is really, really important. Trusting caregivers, right? And you can intellectually know that someone is qualified to take care of your child, and still trust takes time to build. Back, at least pre-COVID, before, when my kids were going to daycare and school, another big concern was all the kid illnesses and like the unexpected. My husband and I used to say we never knew whether we were going to be able to go to work the next day, right? Because our kid might be sick. And it's huge and really distressing to not have a sense of predictability that you can actually get your job done. So those are some of the concerns that are weighing on folks when they go back.
And certainly, I remember back to my own experience, managing the guilt, which is what you were talking about when you started the concern about, am I missing out here? And and the tendency, I think, for a lot of women to try to be super women, right?
Yeah.
Bake the cupcakes when that was possible. Just go to the Little League games, stay up night writing out proposals. I mean, it leads to burnout. So you find that a lot of women really struggle with that type of burnout.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. And a fear of taking breaks, because if you're not working all the time, then it all won't get done, and then you'll be perceived as not being committed to either your job or to parenthood. Yeah.
Yeah. Very, very difficult. And how do you see that women learn how to prioritize, or do they? So they're
Learn
not
how.
beating themselves up.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that I teach in the mindful return course and that I talk about all the time is the micro self-care, really reinforcing to women that they don't have to take huge amounts of time out of their day, because they don't have any, to focus on themselves and set intentions for their day and center before phone calls and breathe, and um, learning to be present where they are,
Yeah, that's a biggie.
is a huge one, right? And so it's some of those like relatively minor tweaks that can make all the difference. I think for me, what changed my perspective and sort of brought me out of a dark hole that I was in early parenthood was a gratitude practice. And I took an online course at the time called the Abundant Mama Project, which was really designed for moms with kids of all different ages and whether you worked outside the home or not, to learn how to focus on the abundance in life instead of just the overwhelm. And for me, it was adopting the daily gratitude practice and starting to view things as abundance that almost gave me the power to craft my own day in a way that made me happier. I also am being a lawyer, I'm a big one for the meaning of words. And I've dropped the word for the past maybe 7 years. I've dropped the word busy from my vocabulary, and life is full, and I don't wear busy as a badge like I used to. I am, have developed the strength and skill to set more boundaries. And I think it's when women are told it's okay to say no, it's okay to set some boundaries. It's actually okay for you to carve out time for yourself during the week, that they're able to get a little bit more space from the angst and the burnout.
A part of that is a negotiation between the couple.
Yes.
And given the fact you're a lawyer, I guess I'm curious whether you include that in your course. It's how do we negotiate for that free time so that partners have some kind of equality in dealing with the different responsibilities.
Yeah, there's a lesson in the course called Partners and Parents and In-Laws, Oh My, which is all about our village, right? And how we negotiate with everybody in our village, whether we have a partner or, whoever else it is that we're interacting with on a daily basis. One example of negotiation that had to happen, or rather that was important to happen during COVID for me, was like I feeling as though I never had any alone time during the week because my kids are home, my husband's home. Like, I'm an introvert. I need some like truly alone, not just I'm locked up and I can hear you all outside my door time. And so my husband and I agreed that we would swap 3-hour increments on the weekend. So I get 3 hours on Saturday to literally roam the neighborhood or do whatever I want. And he gets 3 hours on Sunday. And that really lightened my load and, gave me some time and space to just be me for a while and be alone. And that conversation, I think it's a really frequent conversation that has to happen.
Yeah.
My husband and I are both planners by nature, and we're a little nerdy about this, but we have a Saturday night meeting that we've had for years, where, hot date on the couch on Saturday night, where we pull up our laptops and we have this thing called the Saturday basket, which was a basket where we put all of the stuff that needed to get done during the week that we didn't want to have to deal with, during the week itself. And that was the time when we planned out the week and planned out like who was on point each day if the kid got sick and one person had to go to daycare to pick them up. And that's the time during the week when we ask each other, okay, do you have any alone time carved out? Have you seen your friends lately? If you haven't, which friend are you going to reach out to? Do we have a date night for each other on the calendar? Really being intentional about how we're spending our time and what each person is responsible for has helped us just run more smoothly as a couple and as a family, because we carve out the time every week to talk about it.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I, I when my children were your kids' age, I was
Mm-hmm.
already divorced.
Mm.
And so I didn't
It's gonna be
have that
challenging.
let
Mm-hmm.
me sit down with somebody. But to your point, creating that village
Mm-hmm.
is
Mm-hmm.
so important. And you may not have your parents nearby. Who else can you turn to? And how do you build even a support group of caregivers, really?
Mm-hmm. Which is so much harder now during COVID. I mean,
Oh,
our
it's
entire childcare infrastructure has crumbled beneath our feet right now. And like all the risks of, well, if somebody comes in, have they quarantined and who are they seeing? It's mind blowing right now how difficult it is.
true. And now with the the schools not reopening, I don't know what it's like where you are.
Oh,
In,
body. My
yes,
whole body just sagged when I thought of that. So I'm in Washington, D.C., and as of this moment, they have not yet announced what's happening in the fall. They were going to make an announcement last week. And then a whole bunch of schools nationwide and nearby decided to announce that they were going virtual, which I don't think was the original plan for DC. And so they decided to hold off on their announcement, which I fear means that when they do make an announcement scheduled for, I think, tomorrow, it's likely to be remote, at least initially.
yeah.
And I think a lot of the schools near here have gone remote. They say that they're going remote through January. I can't imagine the schools are really going to reopen in January in the middle of flu season, but I don't know.
Right. And here in California, of course, school starts in like 2 weeks. Probably.
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
in talking to young parents now, that is the major stress area. So it's
Yep.
not necessarily new parents,
No, it's
but it's
existing. Yep.
parents who have kids who are school age or preschool age, and they're both working and they don't know what to do as far as homeschooling.
Yeah.
And the research shows that many parents did not necessarily do a great job with homeschooling.
Yeah, so we have the like March through May as evidence or experience to speak of, and that was not pleasant. It was really, really bad, I think, for a lot of people across the country. And we all thought, okay, well, the virus will get it under control and we'll have a plan for the fall, so we won't have to go back to this. And now that's not true. I think we should also be careful about calling it homeschooling because the folks in the actual homeschooling world are
You're
pretty
right.
adamant that it's not homeschooling. It's remote schooling or remote learning or whatever
Virtual
we want to call
learning,
it, virtual. But homeschooling is a
totally different.
philosophy and a culture and a choice. And there are people who have done it for years and have
And
really
it looks like a
mastered it.
great option now,
I don't
actually,
know.
for some people.
Yeah. I mean, I've listened to some podcasts about homeschooling and I am really appreciative of the philosophy. And I personally don't think I have the bandwidth to have a job, work full time, and create a curriculum, for example. Like that's, and I know that there are resources and whatever available. I'm also very wary of the idea of encouraging people to pull their kids out of districts and schools, which means that the schools won't be getting funded. Like in DC, if we pull our kid out, then the school doesn't get the funding for our child, right? And that could be devastating. I'm also just really depressed about the inequality and
Yes.
injustice of the situation where plenty of us, myself included, can afford to hire somebody to come in and be a tutor for our kids during the day. And that is not the case for so many people across the country.
But not even, there's an inequality even in remote learning. I mean, who
Yes.
has really
Yeah.
good internet access, who has a computer at home,
Yeah.
uh,
Mm-hmm.
who really speaks English well, or
Yeah.
to be able to teach their children. It's
And which parents need to go back to in-person jobs or they're essential workers. And so their kids are just home and it's, yeah, a mess.
Lori, something just popped into my head. If you gave birth during this pandemic,
Mm.
you were going to get parental leave. What happens with that now when everybody's at home anyway?
What do you mean what happens? I mean, you're still if you were going to take a paid parental leave,
Mm-hmm.
you will still take that leave. There are questions around whether people feel like they can take the whole leave or if they need to quote unquote come back sooner because they're
Yeah,
worried about
that's
their
right.
job. But I mean, the opportunity to disconnect from your work email and stop working is still leave, I believe, and that I would strongly encourage people to take and to continue to take whatever leave was allocated to them. So I mean, I have friends and family. I have a new niece who was born just a month ago and who are taking leave right now. And what that looks like is that they're not doing work from home for their job, right? In the way that they were prior to leave.
Right. So even though it's not going to look like a traditional leave.
Yeah, nothing looks like a traditional anything these days, does it?
This is true. This is
Yeah.
true. So much stress on parents and new parents.
Yeah.
Do you find that it's not just new parents, but it's parents of children of all ages who need the type of support you offer?
Yes. So the traditional mindful return online course that I've been running for 6 years now is really just for brand new parents who are transitioning back to work after parental leave. And Mindful Return itself as a company has pivoted to providing more supports and services to working parents broadly who are just drowning right now. We've been doing workshops and webinars specifically for employers. We've done a couple of online courses specifically just for parents to survive. We had one called Make It Through May, and then we did a Make It Through June because people wanted more. And I've done working parent retreats, like a virtual half-day retreat to get people who are working parents to be able to center, reset, take a half day for themselves. So definitely trying to support anyone who is a parent who's working at this time.
That's great. And you're doing all this as a parent yourself and a partner
that,
in a law
yes.
firm.
On a 50% schedule. I have to just keep repeating that is 50% schedule at the law firm. So yes.
Yeah. Lori, thank you so much for the work that you're doing. I mean, it's so important, and probably more important now that we're going through this huge challenge with public health and remote work. So thank you so much for being on Badass Women.
Thank you for having me on, Bonnie. It's been a pleasure. And if there were ever a time to support working parents, it's absolutely in this moment.
So how can my listeners find out more about the work that you do, your books, your podcast?
Sure. So my website is www.mindfulreturn.com. You can email me at lori@mindfulreturn.com. That's LORI@mindfulreturn.com. My book is called Back to Work After Baby, How to Plan and Navigate a Mindful Return from Maternity Leave. And Back to Work After Baby is available on Amazon and also on the shop on the website Motherly. My podcast is called Parents at Work, which you can find, as you said, Bonnie, on all the usual podcast places, including Apple. And let's see, I run a group called the Working Parent Group Network, or WPGN, for the leaders of working parent groups all over the country. So if you know a leader of a working parent group or you are one, feel free to sign up for that. It's at mindfulreturn.com/WPGN. And the online courses we offer for brand new parents run every other month. So we've got one September, November, January, all of that. You can find all the information on our website.
Great resources. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Bonnie.
And thank you, everyone, for listening to Badass Women of Any Age. If you're feeling stuck in your career and tired of playing small, being passed over, check out my website, bonniemarcusleadership.com/coaching, and schedule a complimentary coaching session to get yourself back on track. Until next time, be bold and be your badass self.